The phenomenon of false confessions is something that has been clearly identified as a systemic cause of wrongful convictions. As counterintuitive as it sounds, innocent people do in fact confess to crimes they did not commit. False confessions are to a great degree the result of faulty police interrogations. As one jurist has said, it bears repeating that persons detained or arrested may be quite innocent of what is being alleged against them. Convinced wrongly of the detainee's guilt, the police will take whatever time and energy and ingenuity it may require to wear down the resistance of the individual they know is culpable. Innocent people are induced to make false confessions more frequently than those unacquainted with the phenomenon might expect. There are various studies that have been done on the prevalence of false confessions, and the best estimate is that somewhere in the neighborhood of 25% of all wrongful convictions include a false confession. The read technique is perhaps the most well-known strategy taught to police investigators on how to best obtain a confession. The company that charges a fee to teach police on how to interrogate suspects states in its materials that following its strategies will reduce the number of false confessions. The reality is quite the opposite.
Okay, Maggie, look. Let me break it down to you how it's gonna happen. They're gonna come through that door and be good cop, bad cop. Don't fall for that, all right?
She did it! She did it! She's the one you want!
In Hollywood, everything important in an interrogation is seen or heard. The cop's grimace, the loud yelling, treating a suspect hostile, the light that's way too bright. But in a real interrogation, it's flipped around. Everything important is unseen, unheard. On the surface, real interrogations look boring. The cop is nice to you, they give you a drink, they dress in plain clothes. It's almost disarming, especially if this is more of what you were expecting.
The names, now!
But that's the point. Under the boring, disarming surface of an interrogation, you find a whole host of psychological traps and mental tricks that are designed to make you confess. It starts from the moment you walk in. Every inch of an interrogation room has been designed to make you feel isolated and powerless. The room is small, cramped, the walls are blank, and there are no windows. You'll be placed in an uncomfortable, straight back, often metal chair, while the cop's chair will be able to roll. This becomes important later on. The next move is a hurdle that cops have to get over. When you go to jail, a cop is legally required to tell you you have the right to shut up. This actually turns out to be the only great advice you're gonna get. Talking to cops is always a bad move. And for the cop, what this means is that their first priority is making you ignore this advice and go against everything you've ever heard. They have to convince you to play the game with them. The first questions are deliberately not about the investigation. They want to appear trustworthy so that you'll talk to them about the case.
Where do you work at?
Mama's Cafe, downtown.
I don't think I've tried that one yet.
It's good food.
I'm a big coffee guy. I don't know if you're a coffee guy or
I am
not,
a
but I
coffee
didn't
guy,
want to drink
actually,
in front of you, so.
No, I appreciate that.
All right, go ahead.
There's a plain donut there for you. I have a cereal bar, but if you get hungry or anything else, just let me know, okay? How come you got more than one middle name, do you know?
I don't know. It's my uncles and my grandfather.
I got 3 middle names as well. And that's because my parents thought I was going to be an only child, so they named me after everybody. So I got named after a grandfather and 2 uncles. So I know what you're going through there, because my initials I get teased about.
The other goal behind these innocent questions is to establish a behavioral baseline. They want to see how you act when you're telling the truth. Finally, when they're ready, they'll ask you something like this.
Well, let's do this. You sound like you wanna talk to me, okay? And I wanna hear what you have to say, but before I ask you any questions, you gotta know your rights, okay? You have the right to remain silent. What this says here is that I've read you your rights. Do you understand them? Yes.
Once you're talking, they'll first get a statement about what happened. After hearing it, if the cop thinks you might have done it, if the facts aren't lining up, or if you're acting shady, they may move to the accusation phase. In the accusation phase, they will confidently accuse you of the crime. The cop will say in no uncertain terms, you did it, we know you did it, and we've got evidence for it.
Your vehicle drove up the side of Jessica Lloyd's house. Your boots walked to the back of Jessica Lloyd's house on the evening of the 28th and 29th of January. You and I both know you were at Jessica Lloyd's house, and I need to know why.
But here's the catch. They'll claim they have evidence for your guilt even when they don't.
This nosy neighbor, or whatever we're going to call him, has monitored, and I'm not going to tell you how. Okay, just think about it. With today's technology, monitored what was going on in front of this residence that they were calling to complain about until police arrived. I can prove it. I can go in front of the judge and say, hey, look, bro, you want us to play this video? You want us to show you the fingerprint results? You want us to show you the GRE test on this gentleman?
I did not have that firearm in my hand.
Huh?
The goal here is to make you think that you're already caught. They already have you. Why bother resisting and lying about it when they already know you did it? Just confess.
There are basically 4 types of false confessions: voluntary, stress compliant, coerce compliant, and non-coerce persuaded. With respect to voluntary confessions, the degree of voluntariness will determine whether a confession will be admitted into the trial record. Stress compliant confessions occur when the pressure of the interrogation becomes so intolerable that suspects will confess in order to terminate the questioning. Coerce compliant confessions are the product of classic techniques by police in enlisting confessions by way of threats or promises, and a confession that is non-coerce persuaded involves a scenario where police cause the person being interviewed to become confused and therefore becomes temporarily persuaded of their guilt. In what is now internationally recognized as a non-coerce persuaded confession in the product of an interrogation of Brandon Dassey, a mentally challenged teenager who only provided responses when the answers were put to him beforehand. Not only do innocent people falsely confess, but they can do so in a way that provides surprisingly rich, detailed, and accurate information. We know that these kinds of details could not have originated with someone who is innocent, and as such, they had to have been disclosed to them during the interrogation process. Feeding facts to a suspect contaminates a confession because he or she is told how the crime happened, and the police can never again properly test the suspect's knowledge. The opportunity to obtain reliable voluntary information is lost. If the suspect truly lacks knowledge of how the crime occurred, the bare admission of guilt will not be convincing enough for a jury. Police are trained not to leak facts. Indeed, they intentionally leave out key information when they report a crime to the public so that the public at large do not know everything about the crime. Again, if the police believe the suspect they are interviewing is guilty, they will contaminate the interview with facts the innocent person just could not know. One study found that over 90% of the cases involving false confessions were due to such contamination. However, courts have made clear that in defining the rule to allow confessions, it is important to keep in mind the twin goals of protecting the rights of the accused without duly limiting society's need to have crimes investigated and solved. The relevant factors that go to how voluntary a confession will be seen include whether there was use of threats, promises, oppression, or police trickery. The imminent threat or actual implementation of torture will render a confession inadmissible. Reform in this area all points to the requirement that interrogation of suspects must be recorded. Courts have held that it is difficult to see how the prosecution could discharge its heavy onus of proving voluntariness beyond a reasonable doubt where proper recording procedures are not followed. While in most cases it is not fatal to a prosecution if the police do not record a confession, recording is seen as a best practice, and in those circumstances where no recording took place, a confession will be seen as suspect and potentially false. Our next video lesson will be on jailhouse informant testimony.